Hello, everybody. I'm Michael,
And I'm Carl.
and this is a podcast
That it is.
called Do Your Research.
That it is also.
That it is. Hey, Carl, I know that the last couple times I feel like we kind of just dive right straight into the topic that we had agreed to research for the week, but I was wondering this. It was on my mind. I'm here, it's what, 9 o'clock at night my time over here on the West Coast.
Yes.
It's considerably later there for you.
Midnight.
Yeah, we do a lot of work for this podcast, and so I kind of feel like when I am podcasting here and talking with you, I still have jeans on. So, are you currently a comfy pants guy or a jeans guy right now?
Oh, I'm totally a comfy pants guy. It's midnight.
Okay, that's kind of what I figured. I think any sensible person would be in comfy pants right now, but I was also kind of like, I don't know, should I take this seriously like a job, or should I just be in comfy pants because we're in our own respective homes and no one can see us.
As a person who has been able to work from home before, comfy pants does not mean you're not taking your job seriously.
That's wise. There's wisdom in that. Well, anyway, buddy, it's good to talk to you. I'm glad we're here doing this another week. We got another topic that we sat down and wanted to take a look at this week that's been hot in the news.
Took a break for Thanksgiving and found that we could return to the topic we did the first time, because the president is still attempting a coup.
We're just not out of the woods yet. How many days until the election gets certified by the Electoral College?
11, the 14th of December as of this recording. Well, actually, it's after midnight, so I guess 12 for you still?
Okay, 12 days for me still. It can't come soon enough, honestly. It's bonkers. The world is nuts.
That it is.
Well, anyway, the topic that we're going to talk about that we researched this week is back on the subject of voter fraud again. That issue is not going away. The president still has not conceded the election, and in fact is doubling down on the fact that he had millions and millions of votes that were not counted or that were stolen from him, and that's why he lost the election. Literally no one else besides the president and his cronies and some very far-right alternative news sources are saying this.
Indirect cronies, if you will.
Yeah, indirect cronies.
Freelance.
I would buy that.
Well, not even freelance. Volunteer goons.
Well, they're definitely making money off this. Yeah, And this week we're going to look at one allegation that's going around, specifically centered around the Dominion voting system. Obviously, you've had some parts of this that you've looked into, and I've had some parts that I've looked into, and there's so much here to get into.
Enough that I would even say it's not one thing. We're looking into several that all happen to be about Dominion.
Exactly. It's several different conspiracy theories. Like it's basically like the president's lawyers just took a whole handful of spaghetti and just completely just smeared it up and threw it at the wall just to see what would stick. Like there's so many allegations that they've made around Dominion voting system. It was hard to look into all of them.
Yeah, and I found too, many of them kind of blurred together even. Like there's some strange overlaps between what even in the, I don't know, Trump cinematic universe, I guess. I mean, even within the universe,
TCU.
in canon, if you will, they are distinct allegations, and yet these very people sometimes mishmash them together.
Yeah, exactly. It's a whole smorgasbord of just crazy nonsense. So we just, I mean, I picked a few to look into and dive a little deeper into. I know you did as well. We have a video here, I think, that really does a good job of summing this up.
The Dominion voting systems, the Smartmatic technology software, and the software that goes in other computerized voting systems here as well, not just Dominion, were created in Venezuela at the direction of Hugo Chavez to make sure he never lost an election after one constitutional referendum came out the way he did not want it to come out. We have one very strong witness who has explained how it all works. His affidavit is attached to the pleadings of Lynn Wood in the lawsuit he filed in Georgia. It is a stunning, detailed affidavit because he was with Hugo Chavez while he was being briefed on how it worked. He was with Hugo Chavez when he saw it operate to make sure the election came out his way. That was the express purpose for creating this software. He has seen it operate, and as soon as he saw the multiple states shut down the voting on the night of the election, he knew the same thing was happening here, that was what had gone on.
All right, I think that's good. We can stop that there. Like, wow. So first off, just right off the bat, I'm getting like huge Carol Baskin vibes off of Sidney Powell from here.
I think that might do Carol Baskins an injustice.
That's good. No, I agree. I think it's a cheetah print, this sparkly cheetah print thing. Anyway, I'm not going to criticize her appearance. Just the crazy nonsense that's coming out of her mouth.
I am willing to say I think sparkly, spangly cheetah print for a presidential legal team press conference alleging that the 2020 election of the United States of America was stolen might not be the most appropriate attire.
Yeah, I don't know. I totally agree with you on that. I don't think it's perhaps the most professional thing that somebody could wear when making crazy allegations like this.
Well, okay, you do raise a fair point there. Given the level of crazy of the allegations, it might be exactly the right level of professional.
And I don't know, looking at her eyes while she's saying all of this stuff, like, I don't know if that is just genuine. Like, does she must truly believe this. I think she does. I think she's a real believer.
I don't know. I'm not sold that. I don't know. It's like Mr. Jones, right? You never really know how much when people start making claims that are this absurd, that supposedly have qualifications. I just don't know that you can ever know how much of it is genuine.
Yeah. Well, and I know that we're calling these claims absurd, and it might seem like we're prejudging this, but I know we've spent the last week looking into this. So
the
spoilers.
very nature of our podcast, do your research, would hopefully mean that we aren't prejudging. We're in fact more like, I guess, spoiling our podcast.
Spoiling our podcast, judging based on the things that we have looked into and read. And I'll tell you what, looking into this, I read a lot. I read a lot of very interesting things. There's so much to dive into about like the history of the voting systems, like what what the government has done to try to help improve voting systems in this country, and then just really how the criticisms that I think that are being kind of put out there, and people that are critical of voting system companies, especially ones that have ownership or investment stakes in them from people that may have some questionable motives for why they want to invest or have a controlling stake in a voting systems company. I think there needs to be good transparency that, but that doesn't.
And voting systems are worthy of scrutiny by far and away, and the election system of the United States is not without problems.
Absolutely. And that is to say that, like, you should scrutinize voting systems. And I feel like we did, or at least I certainly did in a big way. And hopefully I can explain a little bit about what I learned from some of this.
Oh, I mean, there are things about even Dominion that are worthy of scrutiny and need to be addressed.
Sure.
It's just, as with many things, these folks happen to be making the sorts of absurd claims that only suck the oxygen out of the room and prevent any meaningful discussion about those real issues.
Exactly. So, like in that clip, just to kind of sum up her argument, she's basically saying that Dominion voting systems was created by Hugo Chavez because he didn't or almost didn't win an election in Venezuela, and he wanted to never lose an election again. So he had this voting software created, and that eventually became Dominion, and now he received, and she doesn't say this, but she goes on to say that Chinese communist money was funneled into it so that it could go all over the world and infect other voting systems, and including in the United States. And they're alleging that it changed millions of votes from Trump to Biden, and even stole votes from Trump. Um, yeah, I think let's fuck. I don't even know where to start with this. Like, do you want to start with the history of Dominion voting systems a little bit? Do we want to dive into
Sure,
that
that
first?
sounds perfect. And I know you've prepared for that.
Yeah, and this is, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but because there's not that much there that's super sketchy. So Dominion Voting Systems started off as a Canadian company. They now are, separate. They're kind of a multinational entity. They're based in Toronto, Ontario, and Denver, Colorado, respectively, for Canada and the United States. They were founded in 2002, and they have been used in federal. Their software and systems have been used in federal elections in the United States. Developed software in-house in offices in the United States, Canada, and Serbia. Interesting, just tacked on there. They serve currently 28 states and Puerto Rico, and cover about 40% of all voters.
When you say they cover 40% of all voters, does that mean they have 40% of voting machines? Are Dominion voting machines? Or is that 40% of all voters, including that they make ballot counting
Oh, I
machines
see.
and stuff
Good
like
question.
that?
No, they currently service elections in 40% of counties that cover 40% of registered voters, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
cover some very large
Does that mean
counties.
they're the only provider in that county?
Yeah, it does vary county by county. Some states allow their different counties to pick their election systems, because all elections are all done at the county level. Um, So that's why you'll see Dominion voting systems in several counties in the state, but you'll also see Dominion's competitors. It's a pretty it's somewhat even market share. I think Dominion's probably one of the bigger of the voting systems companies.
They
Yeah,
are.
that service the country.
Worldwide, they're one of the larger
Mm-hmm.
ones. Um, but I mean, certainly with 40% of the share in the U.S., they're obviously have to be one of the larger
Yeah, and they
ones.
definitely are. Um, in 2018, they were purchased. The management of the company purchased it along with a venture capitalist firm called Staple Street Capital. They're a private equity firm that invests. This is from their website, that invests in market-leading businesses, where it can provide the strategic oversight, financial resources, and access to a network of world-class executives to help its portfolio companies reach their full potential. They're kind of one of these, invest in a mid-sized business and give them money and expertise to be able to help them ramp up to become bigger companies.
Yeah,
Not not
yeah.
super sketchy. I mean, that's a very common things that happens with a company that's on a growth path like that. Um,
Yeah, well, and after the concerns of 2016, um, not even just I mean, the concerns of foreign actors and the multiple bills passed by the House uh, beginning to allocate money for election
yeah.
security, or, well, attempting to, though they did not receive a vote in the Senate.
Mhm.
Um, it is not at all suspect that a firm would see a potential profit in buying into one of the nation's largest election
Sure.
systems.
Absolutely. Yeah, nothing really all that sketchy there. However, that was kind of one of these events that led a couple of Democratic senators, uh, Senator Warren, Senator Wyden, and Senator Klobuchar, to send a letter to some of these companies that were these private equity firms that had invested in these voting systems companies, And basically, this was under the guise of keeping dark money out of politics. They said, hey, we want to know why you're investing, how much you're investing. Private equity firms aren't accountable to the public. And this is, Dominion Voting Systems is a private company. They don't need to share their finances. And so that was obviously something that was concerning to some Democratic senators who
Yeah.
said, hey,
Yeah.
yeah,
And despite my saying that as an investment opportunity it makes sense, that doesn't mean it's not above scrutiny.
absolutely. Yeah. And this is what they were attempting to do, right? They were sending
Yeah.
this questionnaire out. It was voluntary, saying, hey, in the interest of, safeguarding our elections and making sure that we have transparency in the politics and the ownership of our election systems, we want to make sure that there aren't any conflicts of interest. So basically, they send them a questionnaire. Um, that has been something that has been twisted by Sidney Powell, especially in her Georgia lawsuit. She used that as evidence to say that, well, Dominion is untrustworthy. Look, even these Democrats are talking about how terrible Dominion is. And when you go in and actually read the letter, the content of the letter they sent to them is like, oh, this is a different thing. They're not criticizing or saying that, oh, there is voting problems. I mean, they do say that, there has been a history of voting problems, and there most certainly has. They also say that these companies aren't doing enough to invest in R&D and invest in their own security, and they're not accountable to anybody because they're not public companies. So, um,
Well,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, oversight is not supposed to be conducted because you already think something bad
right.
happened. You're supposed to conduct oversight to make sure something bad isn't
Ideally,
happening. And I believe that was it's been some time, but I think that was roughly the context of their
very
letter.
much so.
It wasn't,
Like there's,
you did a bad thing, answer for
yeah,
it. It was, hey, there's potential here.
yeah.
So let's make sure it's not.
There's even a section where they ask in one of the questions about like how much are you spending on R&D and security. Like that was more what they're interested in, is securing the election, and that's something that, of course, Giuliani and Sidney Powell have come out and said, oh well, even the Democrats are saying how crooked this company is. So I think that's one good thing to probably just dispel right there, is if you hear that line that the Democrats have been, against this company and called them out for being corrupt. They haven't, but they have expressed a actual and real concern that I think we should all, you know, we should all take.
Yeah, similarly, there was a, not to derail, sorry, but
Not at all.
um, the last week tonight, the John Oliver show on
Yeah.
politics did a voting machines episode. I don't know, last year, I don't know, right? Um, and that keeps getting posted on right wing social medias like the conservative
Sure.
subreddit, um, because he did specifically talk about some issues with Dominion voting
Mm-hmm.
machines. Um, and of course, it's the same thing there. It's being presented as, see, even the radical left thinks Dominion's a problem. Uh,
Yeah.
but no, he was just pointing out specific things we need to deal with if we're going to use voting machines. And Dominion, as you mentioned, services 40% of America, so they're a pretty prominent example.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Um. Yeah. So lead up to 2020. Domain systems are used in every county in Georgia. Um, they're all using the same software. This is the Dominion D Suite 5.5A. Every county in Georgia is using this, and so this kind of seems where they've centered at least the first of their lawsuits of this kind. Um, and so I wanted to look a little bit more into you know what is this company? What kind of products do they put out there? What kind of things do they sell? And then a little bit about that kind of leads down the path of, well, how do they certify these machines? If all these machines have to go through a certification process, all of the software, all of the machines have to be submitted to the government as kind of a voluntary basis. I guess maybe I don't want to get ahead of myself too much because this is a whole interesting section on this, but I want to see if you had any interesting notes that you found about Dominion or anything I can serve up to you.
Well, I did, but they're more specific to the two topics and the logistics of those topics that I chose to cover, which I'll do
Okay.
later. There are a couple general notes that I would just like to give that aren't Dominion
Sure.
specific. So I don't want to take us down any too many rabbit holes,
There's
but
so many to go
um,
down.
yeah, but just it's sort of this is kind of a general note that applies across a good portion of these conspiracies related to Dominion or not center around like stuff not being
Hmm.
checked. So, just a couple things that I wanted to note before we go into this because it's a factor of all vote changing conspiracies or a good portion of them. But every state that was close this election, the machines, whether they are Dominion or not, have to print paper
Hmm.
records.
Right.
Um, so I know you live in a vote by mail state, but at least in the state I live in, which was not a close state, but is a state that has machines that print records, um, you get a paper with an identifier so they know it's legitimate, and you stick it in the machine, and then you vote, and it prints your vote out on there, and then you turn in the piece of paper. Um, and to note, not like 8.5 by 11 random sheet, but thick identifiable
Yeah.
cardstock, right? Um, so every state that has been close, every state that they're fighting in, close being a relative term where Michigan's
Yeah.
150,000 votes, um, but these there is a paper trail. It's not just software. Additionally, many of these states, Georgia, for example, have mandatory risk limiting or other forms of audits that they just perform. So, like the Georgia recount was not performed because of the legal efforts of
Yeah.
Trump and his campaign. It just was performed because that's the law. An audit was also performed in Georgia. That's kind of like a combination of a hand recount where they use those paper records to check them and then use counting machines after people divide them by which candidate they're voting
Hmm.
for. So, high level of precision to audit that the results were accurate. And so, one thing that I just kept seeing as in researching the Dominion was uh, commenters and even some pundits who would say things like, "Well, they did a recount, but they didn't
Right.
re-verify the
No, they didn't
votes,"
audit it.
or you
Just
keep seeing,
recounted the
"Yeah,
same
they're
fraudulent
just
votes.
counting the same illegal
Hmm.
votes," um, and that misrepresents a lot of the things that do happen. Where, yes, some of those recounts were just recounts, but that's because verification of the ballots takes place before they're counted. Some recounts occurred, but also some audits where they just grab a statistically significant selection of the paper printouts, which they can then make sure uh, anonymously, not tied to the individual who voted, um, were counted accurately by doing a hand recount of the paper ballots and verifying that against the same range in the electronic count. So there are lots of things in place to limit a large amount of the conspiracies about changing ballots in general, whether it's related to Dominion or
Right.
not.
Right. It seems like it's there actually is checks going on here. And when you actually look into how these voting systems and voting machines work, like you see that, oh, there actually is verification that goes into this. Um
Though they could be
yeah,
better. Every state should have a paper trail.
absolutely.
Every state should have a mandate. Given how easy it is to do now because of these machines, I think every state should have a mandatory risk limiting
Yeah.
audit after every major federal election because,
Well, there's a lot of best practices out there that are coming out now,
yeah,
and this actually segues into a little bit of the history that I looked up around, around the technology and voting machines, and a big change happened about 20 years ago with the Help America Votes Act of 2002, or HAVA, I guess as they call it. and it's a federal law. Was passed with pretty bipartisan support, quite frankly. It passed with 375 to 48 in the House and 92 to 2 in the Senate. Um, and it was signed into law by President Bush. So it was drafted kind of in part in reaction to the controversy surrounding the 2000 presidential election. And this was shocking to me when almost 2 million ballots were disqualified because they registered multiple votes or none when running through vote counting machines. 2 million ballots were disqualified.
Nationwide.
That's 2 million disqualified, not because the voter did anything wrong, but because the ballots were faulty.
Yeah. In an election that was decided by less than 500 votes in the state of Florida and had a margin, I know we mentioned this in our first podcast, but to those who would compare the two, an election that had a popular vote margin of less than 500,000, a very narrow electoral college margin that literally could have been decided by one state, Florida, changing, where the popular vote margin was about, or I think slightly less than 500.
Extremely tight margins, like way tighter than we are even getting close to talking about in any of the states in this election. Yeah. So the goals of the Help America Vote Act were, they were multiple. So one was to replace the punch card and lever-based voting systems, to create an election assistance commission to assist in the administration of federal elections, and establish a minimum election administration standards. This is what you're talking about with the idea of like having a vote audit, or having a set of, if a vote falls into a certain percentage of standard deviation from the mean, like we're gonna look at these. Also, how we manage the votes. We're gonna kind of set a quality standard that all the states have to reach, essentially to make federal funding available for them to help run their elections. So this was something that obviously was very needed after the 2000 election, and
something that less than 20 years ago you could actually get bipartisan
support for. And pretty strong bipartisan support too. I mean, those are numbers we don't see very much these days.
Well, quite literally these days, Mitch McConnell won't even bring the election security bills to a vote on the floor.
Of course not. No. Yeah.
Though he's happy to give a official Senate address talking about how we need to make sure the election is secure after the fact.
God, that guy. I just want to listen to that turtle talk. Anyway, it would be nice to Mitch McConnell in this podcast. No, I'm not going to. Fuck him.
No, we won't. No.
Oh, man. He's awful. And just so I don't get, accused of being, too partisan, fuck Pelosi too. Get her out of there. Get all these old people out of here. Let's get some younger people in. Anyway, now that I've, cursed multiple politicians,
I am not willing to mention Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell
in the same sentence.
Time. I'm gonna have to object there. Yeah, she has problems. I'm not saying she should still be in office, that she's great or perfect, but
no, again,
she is willing to do her fucking job.
Yeah, exactly. And she's yeah. I have, I guess, worse things to say about McConnell. So, we'll leave it at that.
I have ideological differences with Nancy Pelosi. I think Mitch McConnell is a garbage who has prevented the Senate from doing its critical work now for 6 years.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Nancy Pelosi's been there forever, man. Like, forever.
No, Mitch has been majority leader for 6 years.
I know he has, but I mean, Pelosi's been in a leadership role since the 80s. She was the youngest or the first female Speaker of the House, I think.
Yeah, she wasn't Speaker the entire time.
No, not the entire time. Yeah, I know. Obviously, that would have been weird for the Republicans to appoint a Democratic Speaker of the House. Well, they had a majority.
She wasn't the Speaker even when the Democrats held the House all the time.
Well, we're gonna have to go back into some of that history because I guess I'm I'm not so well versed on my Pelosiisms. All I know is that there's just too many old people in politics, man. I want to see some.
Yeah,
I want to see some. Maybe getting rid of some of these career politicians because maybe the people that grow up wanting to be politicians aren't the kind of people that we should have being politicians.
I, I think we're going down too many rabbit holes,
We
but
are.
I'm going to disagree with you
Ah,
there as well.
man.
I
All
think
right.
that
Contentious.
absolutely we should have people who treat the governance of our country as their career and ambition.
Really? You know,
Don't you want a doctor who treats being your surgeon as his ambition and career? Why would you not want someone whose career is to navigate and facilitate the functioning of our
I
government?
guess I mean that's what you have the career folks that work in the agencies for. I don't know. I guess I'm just all about the swords to plowshares kind of idea where you know.
I think that you have fallen victim to a long running, uh, mostly on the right, talking point about how somehow someone doing something for their career makes it a bad thing.
It's not that it's all right. I don't want it to maybe I'm misinterpreting or I'm not presenting my
I think the
argument
people
properly.
involved are too old.
Yeah, but it's not an
I think we
ageist.
need new career
Yeah.
people, but I do not think the idea of someone having being a representative in the House of Representatives and a senator is their career is exactly the sort of people I
But
want.
those are the kind of people that are corruptible, right? I mean, arguably,
Not if you put the right system in
well, okay.
place.
I guess systems can be put in place to kind of help prevent some of that stuff, but
Not if your bureaucracy is appropriately
mm,
structured.
I don't
New people are corruptible too.
totally right.
It's also possible to corrupt people if after 2 years in Congress they don't have a job. That is more of an incentive to secure outside
Mm,
interest.
maybe this is one of those cobra killing scenarios where you don't want cobras around in India, so you offer a bounty for cobra tails, and then people start breeding cobras so they can start harvesting them for their tails, and then you have an out of control cobra population once you stop paying people for all of these tails that they're clearly farming.
I think that approaches, but I would use the example of term limits. On their face, I understand many motivations for them, but let's imagine a term limit. Even if we remove money from politics and it doesn't cost however many millions of dollars to become a representative or a senator, which
Yeah, I
we
mean, we
should.
could spend that money on other
Um,
things, but yeah.
if we invoke term limits, if we implement term limits, and those term limits are very short, who that means our actual representatives will be a revolving door,
Right. Right.
right? So the representatives are the ones who run the government. The president runs the executive branch and hires people beneath him to hopefully appropriately advise and run the departments. And the various committee members in the House and Senate choose what legislation we will work through in an incredibly wide breadth of subjects. It is far more complicated than any one person can actually know or be an
Right.
expert
Of
in.
course.
The under Newt Gingrich as the various agencies that operated under the congressional budget that were entrusted with educating our Congress people, like the Office of Technology, were dismantled. That leaves just lobbyists. And if you also have a revolving door of politicians, the only people in Washington with any experience will be the lobbyists for moneyed interests.
Hmm. So you're saying that by putting and imposing term limits on Congress people, that responsibility or the I guess the continuation of government activities will all kind of fall on the shoulders of these paid lobbyists that understand how the system
I mean, not
works.
completely, but we'll have. But if Congress people are moving in and out, and their staff will also be changing in and out as different Congress people rotate in. It's not the congressional staff of the second senator of the great state of Nebraska that works in Washington. It's the congressional staff of that specific senator, and those people will move in and out, and the government's moving in and out. And you only have a job for 4 or 8 years. Well, then you have to think about what you're going to do 4 or 8 years after that. Uh, Many of the problems that people think exist because we don't have term limits would also exist because of term limits. In some cases, they could be made worse. In some cases, they could be made better. It's not a silver bullet. It's not the solution. And while, yes, some people who are there forever become corruptible, others who are there for a long time become remarkable experts in the functioning of our government and excellent representatives for their people. It's
So you're saying that the real solution is just to get the money out of politics, and that way we will attract more people who are legitimate civil servants who
uh,
have an ambition to
well,
serve their communities.
the money out of elections,
Yeah.
especially, but sure, yeah, the money out of politics, and we should fix
Yeah.
corruption. I'm merely saying that I think that there is an undue negative connotation to the idea of a career
Mm.
politician. The U.S. federal government is one of the largest organizations on the planet. Of course, we want people who want to work in it as their career.
You make a good point, and I'm thinking that at some point in one of these podcasts, we're gonna have to do an actual structured debate. I didn't. I didn't.
Yeah, I think that would
Yeah,
be
I
good.
didn't. I hadn't formed my thoughts or organized them on this topic at all before we got into this. But
I will only leave with this last metaphor, but I know we've ended up down a rabbit hole.
we have
But I would challenge you, or I guess anyone who listens to this,
me staring in.
both of our
Yes.
listeners, to think about if you've ever had a job where you just had a different boss every month or week. And I would say, even if that job was like a grocery store or a dining hall or fast food, your job was chaos when your boss was changing constantly. And think about the level where that was occurring, and then multiply that exponentially to the size of the federal government.
All right. You make a good point there because I'll give you one anecdote and then we'll get back on topic. But my dad my dad was a civil engineer, as you know, and so he was in city government. And he would always tell me that, whenever a mayor or a new city manager was, voted in, or was hired, that interim time before they got sworn in, and actually took over the position between the election and their actual inauguration, like, no work got done because the expectation was that, oh well, the new boss is just going to come and change everything anyway, so we're not going to do anything or start any major initiatives or really do anything for a couple of months until the new boss is here. So to that point, I see what you mean about it kind of being a chaotic kind of churn inducing process to always be constantly revolving in new heads of different offices and even congressional offices. I could see
Yeah.
that as a barrier to progress, certainly.
Yeah. Someone's not bad because they're a career politician or because it's their ambition.
Right.
Someone's bad because they're
Corruptible, right.
or
Yeah.
corrupt or have motivations that aren't making the government the best it can be for this country and its people.
Yes. We need more civil servants in government and people who understand what actually being a servant means.
Yes.
Anyway, so that was man, I'm glad we got into that.
Sorry.
No, that's good. We're keeping it in. I wanted these days I want to actually sit down and actually do a real kind of point to point debate with you. I think that'd be very fun. I think you'd probably still win, but it would be fun to try.
Those sorts of debates don't have winners and losers. They just have people that are either more informed afterwards or not.
Fair enough. And hopefully it's both of us. But
Well, yeah, if it's not, then we both
There
lose.
we go. So let me talk a little bit about the EAC. This is the Election Assistance Commission I mentioned that came out of the resulting Help America Vote Act of 2002. So the EAC is an independent, bipartisan commission that's charged with developing guidance to meet the Help America Vote Act requirements, adopting voluntary voting system guidelines, and serving as a national clearinghouse of information on election administration. So it also accredits the testing laboratories that certify the voting systems and software, and it audits all the use of Help America Vote Act funds to make sure that states are spending that money appropriately. So it's a pretty interesting organization. And one of the things that I really liked about it when I was reading into it is that there are 4 members of this commission. As it is truly bipartisan. There can't be more than 2 commissioners from a single party that are on the commission. So there are currently 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. And the 2 Republicans that were appointed by Trump, reading into their backgrounds, I'm like, these people sound pretty awesome. Like they're kind of the career, what do you call it? People in government that aren't in the elected positions, but they're the ones that kind of keep everything moving, that know how the systems work.
Yeah,
and
career government officials.
career government officials. And these people were all about, even the Republicans were about expanding voting access to people and touted that on their resumes and their bios, which I thought was really cool. Had actually stood up for voting rights of people and made sure that it was important to vote. And even the people that Trump appointed that are they're basically appointed by the House of Representatives will put forward 2 names when commissioners need to go on. They serve 2 terms. And so the House will float 2 people to the president, and the president will pick them based on those recommendations. Yeah. So any rate, so they were interesting to look into. But also their website is just a wealth of information. Like you want to know how voting systems are tested. If you want to know how, like all the different voting guidelines, how each state does different things, all the differences in state, voting rules that differ from each other, like all of it is there on this website. It is a huge wealth of information about voting in this country. But I think the big takeaway is that in order for any software or any voting system to be used in the United States, it has to go through this voluntary process where they submit to all of the
one of those quote voluntary and
it's
quote
it's like it's the same thing about the
it's voluntary, but if you don't do it, you won't be certified, and no one can buy your stuff.
Well, it's like you won't be certified, and then if the states want the funding from the federal government, they can't buy your machines. Yeah. So if you want to actually be a approved voting system in this country, you have to go through this process, and it's a fairly rigorous.
Oh, it's a long held process to secure actual federal oversight through just like, here we'll make these funds available, but
kind of like the drinking age too, like the drinking age. Right? State by state.
Or busing when schools were desegregated.
Yes, yep. But at any rate, so Dominion, to get back to the conspiracy theory around it, personal attorney to President Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, asserted that Smartmatic, a company that I'll talk about here in a little bit, was founded by the former socialist Venezuelan leader Hugo Chavez, and that it owned and provided software to a related company, Dominion Voting Systems, who we are talking about. Giuliani asserted the Dominion is a radical left company with connections to Antifa that sent America voting data to foreign Smartmatic locations. Smartmatic.
I'm sorry. I just love that, like the allegation that a company is radical left with ties to Antifa is just.
I know we're just glossing over that shit now because
that's
it's like...
not a provable or disprovable claim. It's just not it's absurd.
It's and just so we're clear, I think both of us have the same stance on this. Like Antifa is an ideology; it's not a group. Like it.
Yeah, there's some groups with it in their label. That's
absolutely.
True.
Yeah. But
I guess conceivably, like Dominion could have a member who's part of like Rose City Antifa or something like that. I don't know.
Absolutely. You could, but like also, I mean, I don't know if this is too hot a take, but like. Antifa is an ideology like white supremacy is an ideology.
Yeah.
I mean, is that going too far, do you think?
No, I think that's absolutely a salient point. White supremacy is not an organization, it's an
Right.
ideology. There's white supremacist
Yeah.
organizations, just as there are
Anti-fascist
organizations
organizations.
that are
Yeah,
anti-fascist.
absolutely. So they sound very intelligent when they say, yeah, it's they're in cahoots with Antifa.
Yeah, it's exactly like it'd be like saying white supremacy funded
They're
this
in cahoots with
organization.
white
It's like,
supremacy. Like,
do you mean they're white supremacists?
no,
No,
the idea of
they're
white
in cahoots
supremacy
with them.
itself is actually donating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So
Of course, we are a country that fought a war against drugs.
yes, we did. Drugs won, by the way. I don't know if you knew this, but
Drugs are
drugs,
winning in a big way.
yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of innocent bystander. I shouldn't say. Fuck it. No, release all the people on drug charges who are nonviolent. That's so fucking stupid. Get them out of prisons.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a topic for another day. So in response to this, Dominion
Probably
has,
not a very interesting debate between
no,
us.
probably not. I don't think we'll be on opposite sides of that.
So, yeah, I'd be like, yup.
It's not a good debate. But anyway, Dominion, of course, had to respond to this, because of course they fucking do, because it's 2020 and this is America. Dominion has no ties to the Venezuelan government nor any foreign government, including China and Iran. Dominion has never participated in any elections in Venezuela and has no connection or relationship to the now deceased former Venezuelan dictator Hugo Chavez.
Dead 7 years.
He's been dead for a little bit now. Other companies have serviced elections in Venezuela, but Dominion is not one of them. So here's where this gets weird, Carl, because I was looking at this and going like,
oh, here's where it gets weird. Huh?
So, behind every crazy conspiracy theory, there's like some little fragment of truth in there, right?
I used to believe that before we started our podcast.
Well, all right. I guess it's not a universal trope, but in this case, it's actually a little bit true. And
Really? Okay.
It's a little bit true in that it's not true, but it is true that the company Smartmatic that Rudy Giuliani has referenced does actually have some Venezuelan ties, and specifically ties to Chavez.
Oh, okay. So it's true in that he didn't make up a company.
No.
It's true in that the company
is
he
real
talked about isn't fictional.
And kind of got their start in Venezuelan elections. Like, they don't have any affiliation at all that I could find with Dominion. And even in Sidney Powell's lawsuit that she filed, she brings up Smartmatic and Dominion in the same paragraph, but never actually makes any sort of allegation that the two are combined at all. She basically says, well, this company, Smartmatic...
If she makes it through this and continues to be licensed to practice, I'll be
I know,
impressed.
in 2 states, too. That's in Florida and Virginia. Or Texas and Virginia. Crazy. So Smartmatic, a little bit about them. Here's where the fraction of truth and kind of questionability comes into this. So Smartmatic was founded in 1997 by 3 engineers, Antonio Mugica, Alfredo Jose Anzola, and Roger Pinate. I hopefully got those last 2 right. That first one I just butchered.
I mean, I'm definitely not going to try and correct.
Yeah, so they were a group of guys working at a company called Panic Group Corp in Caracas in Venezuela. And following the 2000 presidential election and the whole hanging Chad fucking nonsense in Florida, the group proposed to dedicate a system towards electoral functions because they saw how bad the United States had fucked up our election system. And they were like, hey, we should do better than those guys.
Hey, a possible market.
So they officially incorporated on April 11th, 2000 in Delaware. So they started off as, incorporated as an American company. And then they established its headquarters in Boca Raton, Florida with 7 employees, got funds from private investors, and then they began to expand. They kind of started out this little tiny nothing company, no experience in voting technology, and then kind of got just chosen by the Venezuelan authorities to replace the country's election machinery ahead of a contentious referendum that it was a recall election for Hugo Chavez in 2004.
Yeah, I mean, notorious hallmark of, you know, totally not corrupt governments to just pick a random tiny foreign company that does not have the requisite experience to redo an entire national infrastructure
Right,
project.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit interesting. I would say that's a little sketchy to the start. Um, so they got about $120 million from its first three contracts with Venezuela. Um, and then with that money, they bought a little bit larger and more established company called Sequoia Voting Systems,
Okay.
which at the time had in by 2006 had voting equipment installed in 17 states and in the District of Columbia. Um, so and then at that time too, the owner of Smartmatic was also running both companies at the same time. Uh, in 2007, Smartmatic announced that it was
He was running both companies prior to the purchase
after the
of
purchase.
the.
So they kept them as two separate
Okay.
entities with
Yeah.
one
Oh,
head.
okay. Yeah.
Um, and in 2007, they announced that they were going to sell Sequoia, um, and I think the management team then ended up purchasing the Sequoia voting systems from some in Smartmatic. That there's like so you look at this and you're like, okay, well, there's some sketchy stuff there. Like maybe there was some, who knows what's actually going on behind the scenes with this.
I mean, at the same time, and just from a view of companies dealing with
Yeah.
governments, it often is very troublesome to change the name of your company depending on how that government wrote its
Hmm.
laws. And it can make sense to keep things separate just from a pure bureaucratic standpoint, even if you share a management team.
Sure.
In the insurance world, for example, many states require insurers to be doing business in their state. So, like Blue Cross Blue Shield is a national company, but it also has lots of state level organizations and things like
Right.
that.
Yeah, and I think that part of it is maybe the least sketchy part of it. I think them coming out of kind of nowhere, out of obscurity, and saying, "Hey, um, you know,
Now we can buy a company that's already successful at the thing we don't even really do much of yet.
yeah," it's more like, "Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
figure out how you can automate your election process." Right,
Yeah.
and
Well,
fix some of the shit the
Bill
Americans got
Gates
wrong.
bought his operating
Yeah,
system.
yeah, that's true. So, and since then they've gone global. I mean, they help with elections in Africa, in Europe, in South America, and they are active somewhat in the United States as well. But they're not in any way that I could find at all connected to Dominion voting systems. Um, and in fact, that's a specific point that Dominion that says it's never been owned and does not own Smartmatic. Um, and in fact, they're actually competitors. So it's like
Yeah.
it's not that. And the only way that Smartmatic is involved in the United States elections at all is they did some work in the 2016 U.S. Republican primaries in Utah. And then in Los Angeles County, I thought this was kind of interesting. Um, so Los Angeles County has about 5 million registered voters, and they were looking for a new electoral system in like 2009. And after they determined, like this is Los Angeles County, that the available systems weren't suitable, they didn't find anything they liked, and so they initiated an act to establish a publicly owned voting system for the county of Los Angeles and provide the electoral
Okay.
methods and voting jurisdictions interested in replicating the process. So in 2017, Los Angeles County signed a $282 million contract with Smartmatic to create an election system to be used in future elections and became the first publicly owned voting system in the United States.
Okay. So they were hired as a third party developer, but they didn't even maintain
No,
ownership.
exactly. And in fact, the system was used for the first time during the 2020 California Democratic primary specifically.
Okay.
And both the software and hardware were developed in the U.S. by Smartmatic, and the ownership of all products and intellectual properties belonged to the Los Angeles County. So they didn't even keep any
Okay.
of the intellectual property at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, could be that maybe they got their start. I mean, if I wanted to be really conspiracy minded, because I think there are different ways to look at some of um, these elections in Venezuela and analyze them statistically for evidence of voter fraud, and there is some that exists. There was a really fascinating journal paper that I was starting to read, and I was like, I can't get into this and read this more, just because there was just so much information there and so much data.
Yeah.
But it's basically going over looking at all of the Venezuelan elections from all of Chavez's elections from when he first won his first one in like 1998 or something like that. And they use what's called the Benford test. Have you heard about that?
No, I don't think so.
Ah, man, we're gonna have to look into this at some point too, because the Benford test is fascinating. It's looking at like it's statistical probability of distribution of numbers, essentially, that says
Okay.
that if in a system with certain parameters, you would expect a random or a somewhat random distribution of numbers to fall, um, based on different counts that you get. And so when you look at the data in the macro, there's a way for you to kind of tell if data has been manipulated, because it doesn't behave the same way that it would if it were real data.
Okay.
And you can look at that, and
Yeah.
there's some criticisms of it, but it's a fascinating statistical exercise that I was just like, oh, this is so cool, but I don't have time to like really just get into all of this. But the short, I guess, takeaway from that is that there is some, statistical evidence that there was some corruption in Venezuelan politics and in their
I
elections.
mean,
We had a,
yeah.
you had a dictator. Like it's
There's also a lot of evidence that isn't
right. And
statistical.
it wasn't like Russian level dictator either. Like he's not winning with 90% of the votes. He's winning with like in the 60s and in the 50s, and like the highest he ever got was like in the 70s or something like that. Um, So I mean, high enough to win, obviously, and all of that, and definitely a lot of criticisms to be made for Chavez. I don't think this is going to be a pro Chavez podcast, but yeah.
No.
Um, again, to the point that they're trying to make, to say Smartmatic, Venezuelan started company that is corrupt and receives communist money and is in charge, like owned by Dominion, and there's no connection there. That's the part
Yeah.
that they're kind of failing to put forward, is like, how are these companies connected?
Well, and even the things we noted that are questionable don't necessarily apply to things like their work in LA.
Right.
Uh, that's honestly the ways in which they are questionable are just questions of capitalism and the greed associated with it. And to slightly reference an earlier tangent, whether or not you legislate that to allow corruption. And yeah, things they took advantage of to make money in Venezuela just weren't really avenues here, and they're not connected with Dominion anyway. So,
Yeah. So that's kind of, I wanted to kind of address that, because I did think that that was something that I found that I was like, oh, this doesn't, it's not completely out of left field. Like again,
yeah,
there is
yeah,
something there to look at. It's just not what they're saying it is.
yeah. I mean, that's not what they're saying it is doing a lot of work there because it's really, 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 really not what they're saying it is.
It's a hot
But
take.
okay, you did name a real
Hmm.
company that does work with voting systems that did work in
Yeah,
Venezuela. Um,
exactly.
but nothing else was true.
Yes, and somehow from beyond the grave, like Hugo Chavez has come back and said that he is gonna, manipulate the U.S.
I
presidential
mean, man,
elections.
we had dead people voting for Democrats. Is it that much of a stretch to think you had dead people doing campaigns
Yeah, I
too?
guess so, man. And Chavez, he was on board with these conspiracies, man. Here's some little fun facts that I learned about Chavez. Hugo Chavez in September 2006 said of 9/11 conspiracy theories that they were, quote, not absurd, and that, quote, a building never collapses like that unless it's with an implosion, unquote. So Chavez
Well,
was a 9/11 truther.
cool. I didn't
he
know
also
that.
he
That's
also
funny.
told reporter Christopher Hitchens that he did not believe the footage of the Apollo 11 moon landing was genuine.
Oh, cool. He didn't think the moon landing was
Yeah.
real.
And he also made a speech on Christmas in 2006 where he complained that a minority of the descendants of are the same ones that crucified Christ, quote, had now taken possession of all the wealth of the world.
Whoa, Rothschild globalist.
Yeah,
Wow.
so
Man, I was hoping for flat earther, but that took a dark
yeah,
turn.
no, he's a I bet that he had a copy of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion on his bedside table
Yeah.
in Spanish. If they I'm sure they translated it, right?
I
I
wonder.
wonder.
I want to check.
Oh God, I was looking at this going, oh my God, Hugo Chavez was totally into conspiracy theories. Like that's just perfect. So I guess for somebody to pick for them to be the boogeyman for this, thanks Giuliani and Powell for that. You guys appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Okay. That was fun.
Oh yeah, just a little levity to lighten things up before
Yeah.
we dive back into this just crazy nonsense. So I don't know. That's kind of what I found, at least as far as like Dominion itself, without going into detail about like how the voting systems work, because we'll be here all night. Um, but I
Yeah.
did get in the sources for this. We'll take our sources and we'll put them down in our description so that people can, if they want to, go back and read these things. And especially looking at I found it really interesting looking at everything on the EAC website talking about the certification of software. And I even just for shits and giggles went and downloaded the PDF that had all of the anomalies that were found during the EAC testing of the very latest um, Dominion voting system software. I want to go see if I can find it because it was I was like, oh, this is interesting. Oh yeah, here we go. So this is Democracy Suite 5.5-A. This is a modification that was submitted by Dominion Voting Systems Corp. And it was approved on January 19th of 2019. And this they
Okay.
certified the software. It was an amendment to the software. So they're testing this, and they have like a PDF download that you can get from all of the um, I guess they call it anomalies in certification testing. So the issue type, well, I'll just read the first one, was an anomaly. Status was anomaly addressed, right? Uh, the priority for it was a 4, which is considered insignificant. And the
Okay.
summary of the anomaly that they found was a freeze during a write-in candidate for a general election. So basically,
Okay.
yeah, the steps leading up to
It's a
the
software
issue.
bug
Yeah,
report.
exactly. Basically, like you inserted a poll worker card and activated a ballot. You selected school director, 2-year term, first precinct. Type in a candidate's name, and then the device froze. And
Yeah.
rebooting it and turning it back on made it so that the error went away and voting resumed as normal. So that
So low
that was the
priority.
one discrepancy
Yeah.
that they found during testing. So I just thought I would just throw that out there because I was like,
Yeah.
if you want to look at how these voting systems are, uh, how they're authorized, how they're tested, how they're certified, like it's literally all there. It's a government website, so they just literally have everything in a PDF for you to download and just waste hours and hours just looking into all this stuff if you really want to. It's that kind of wealth of data that like I mean, I guess maybe this is a fallacy to think this, but when somebody puts out that much data and information, like I tend to think that like, okay, this is transparency, right? This means that you're not trying to fucking hide anything. You're not being shady about it. You're putting it all out there. I mean, maybe that's a logical fallacy, but it certainly would be a crafty conspiracy if that were true.
It's not a fallacy, but it can be taken to reductive extremes. For example, you see people excuse behaviors of the current administration simply because they did it publicly. They assume it must be fine, legal, and good. Um,
Hmm.
because that's just the way they're doing it so publicly. So you have to be cautious, but it's not a fallacy to see that as transparency because it is transparency. And people who actually are experts in these things have access to this information and would be able to tell us if there was something wrong.
Right.
Now, that too can be a fallacy, the appeal to the expert, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
It's just like
yeah, anything's
the fact
illogical.
that they're not referencing any of this information is something.
Yeah, and it doesn't smell good. I'll say that.
No.
No, it really doesn't. Um, but yeah, I think I've talked enough about that for now. Obviously, if anybody listening to this wants more, we'll post up all of our notes and links to everything we read for this. It's a lot, really is. But I want to hear more about what you looked into, Carl.
Sure. So I'm gonna flip the order because the second thing I looked into is actually a little closer to what you looked into. Um, and well, it's funny to see how.
I can't
So
wait.
there was a claim. It has been propagated by some of the Trump legal squad.
Legal Squad is
But
definitely
in
good. Yeah.
particular, it seems to originate from House Rep, Texas Republican Louis Gomer,
Louis.
who, as as a Republican in the federal House of Representatives, asserted that he learned from a quote German tweet in
Oh, I
German
fucking heard about
quote
this. Ugh.
about a raid in Frankfurt. This raid was supposedly conducted by the United States Army on the offices of a Spanish company, Cytl. It's SCYTL, to seize servers that had information about Dominion software. So they were Dominion servers for the U.S. election. This conspiracy has also gone well outside of that in some circles with allegations that the U.S. Army was fighting CIA mercenaries for these servers.
Straight up LARPing.
It's truly gotten wild, but that was not Louis Gomer's allegation. It's just what it's grown to from some of the right-wing
Oh man.
people.
This.
I think in order to tie Gina Haspel, who's I guess not Trumpy enough anymore, but supposedly, so U.S. Army raids servers of a Spanish company in Frankfurt, Germany.
In Germany, okay. All right. I'm kind of following.
Now, and this company, Cytel, supposedly linked to Dominion and has Dominion servers. So first and foremost, the United States Army has categorically denied this. And I don't mean as in saying, like, no cagey statements like, oh, we can't comment. Nothing like that. They just straight up, like, the official statement was just that this is completely false.
And just to be clear, the current commander-in-chief is who?
Donald Trump.
Oh, right. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I forgot. This
Yeah.
is Trump's.
Yeah.
This is Trump's military that's saying this. Okay.
Yes. So
Oh, Trump's military.
but yeah, not really elaborated, just literally like,
No.
this is completely false. Cytel also has denied having United States Army or law enforcement or any U.S. personnel raid their servers or offices anywhere on the planet.
Oh, God.
And in fact, Cytel does not have offices in Frankfurt, Germany.
Oh, God.
They did have an office and some backup servers in Frankfurt from where they were servicing some European elections.
Okay.
But those offices were closed in September of 2019.
Oh,
so
last year.
Not even there for it. Additionally, that's what those offices were for. Cytel does not actually tabulate, tally, or count votes for the United States.
Okay.
And while Cytel does do work with U.S. election systems, they provided software to train poll workers. They built some platforms this year to help register absentee voters. And they built some of the centralized software platforms that were used for the unofficial and live tabulation of results to provide public updates.
Okay.
But not the official counting, just the interim results being reported up by counties to state level that they would then provide to the
kind of
public to let us know how it was going.
background stuff. Yeah, okay.
Also, Sitel and Dominion are completely separate companies. They are two, much like the company that you looked into,
Smartmatic,
they are
yeah.
competitors.
Yeah.
In fact, Sitel and Dominion are two of the largest voting system companies on the planet. They are direct competitors, directly fighting for market share in the exact same business group. Sitel is not going to have Dominion servers.
They count votes for each other, though, in countries where
Yeah.
they're not working.
Also, when you run election systems, they have to be run locally, at least for the United States.
Yeah.
Like, vote counting systems are run at the counting level. They're not even run in different states.
Right.
Sitel's systems, which didn't even count votes, were run in the U.S. They did have some stuff running over AWS, the Amazon Web Services, but again, they weren't counting votes. I don't know what they were running over AWS. Probably the voter registration platform, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Or the training platform.
Or like literally
something,
everything on the internet fucking running on AWS.
Yeah, I mean, that's not suspect,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So their servers couldn't run abroad if they were U.S. servers. They're competitors of Dominion, so they wouldn't have Dominion servers. And at the place where Representative Gomer alleged the raid took place, they don't have an office in the city.
Oh, God.
So,
Ugh.
they're like, this is one of those ones where there literally is just nothing to it
here
other than like Sitel does in fact exist.
And somebody read a German tweet in German.
Yeah, I guess. And of course it got picked up, it got amplified. There's not really a lot more to that one. Sitel and Dominion are both election system companies. They are direct competitors. And sort of relating to what I mentioned up top, because of the way our election systems work, this just doesn't make any sense, right? Like, they didn't email the file with the votes in it to Frankfurt, Germany to be counted. Why in God's name would you even do that? That's not how software or computers work.
I guess maybe that really does kind of inform my question about, does Sidney Powell actually really believe this shit? Because, I mean, she's smart enough to be a lawyer. So, like,
the only way she can believe this shit is if she doesn't know a whole lot of things about what she's
well, I do
about.
believe that. I do believe that.
Yeah.
And it could be a willful ignorance
Yeah.
thing. Because, I mean, God, dude, seriously, if you go and read her lawsuit and all of the things that they allege, and then everything that they're announcing to back it up, it's like, is this it? Like, am I missing a page? No, I'm not missing a page. No, you just said, well, some guy said it. And he's secret, so we can't tell you who he is. But here's his affidavit. And it's like, you're gonna have to tell the judge.
Like, one of the cases, they wouldn't even give the identity of the witness to the other party in the lawsuit.
Yeah.
It's like that's how the law works on TV.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as surprise witnesses in real life.
We have an adversarial court system. That means that, like, you as the defending party have a chance to know who the witnesses are and then be able to, attack their credibility or get the jury to credit their credibility, if, like, to question it if it gets that far, which, spoiler alert, like, none of these lawsuits are ever going to see a jury. Like,
no, the only thing a surprise witness is going to get you in the U.S. is a mistrial.
Yeah. And honestly, Sidney Powell's been a lawyer for so many years. She should know this shit.
Yeah, I mean, we do.
I mean, yeah.
So, like,
we're just two assholes that just looked into this shit for a week. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
But okay, so that's the Frankfurt raid, and I thought that was interesting because of the corporate connection part there, where again they're just like merging voting system companies together in their weird fan fiction.
It does, and honestly, they all kind of sound like supervillain companies, like Sitel and Smartmatic. That sounds like a nerd company, but like Dominion. Like this.
Yeah, Dominion totally
Dominion
sounds like a
voting
supervillain
systems.
company.
Yeah.
Which actually, thank
Hmm.
you, is a perfect transition to the other thing I looked
Oh,
into.
please.
So this allegation was kind of interesting. It's just sort of this grouped allegation about changing and or deleting
Okay.
votes. Um, this is something that has been propagated by the President of the United States himself on Twitter. It's been alleged by Rudolph Giuliani. It's been alleged quite prominently on, oh God, I hate that I have to use the word prominent
Ugh.
and One America News
Ugh.
in the same sentence now,
Gross.
but by OAN and then tweeted by the President of the United States. So prominent. And it's just, it's a big ball of bullshit. But my favorite part I found was that one of the things that was listed as proof in this made more the conservative Facebook circles. I haven't found where this actually got reported on OAN, but it sounds like the sort of thing you might hear on an Alex Jones
Oh
episode.
boy.
But one of the pieces of quote evidence end quote that they are changing votes is that there's this Facebook post that showed up that shows that their logo is a red ballot going into a red box with a blue ballot coming out of the
Oh
bottom,
no.
and that their slogan is changing how people vote. Now, first, that's not their logo, and that's not their slogan. You can see this on their website, right?
Sounds like a
it's just
joke.
on their website.
Oh god.
So even if that, okay, so their logo is a red ballot going into a red box, but someone photoshopped in
A
the
blue
blue
ballot
ballot
coming out of the bottom. I
bottom.
love it.
And their slogan is accurate, reliable, transparent.
I like
So
changing how people vote better.
yeah, I mean, but like to that point, even if it were changing how people vote, and even if their logo were a red ballot going into a red box with a blue ballot coming out of the bottom, that doesn't prove anything. We don't live in National Treasure.
Smoking gun,
Life
Carl.
is not the fucking Da Vinci Code.
Smoking
People
gun.
don't. There is no lesser magic. They don't have to clue you in on their conspiracies. If they wanted to subvert the election system, I would think that the multi-million dollar at least company probably wouldn't put clues in their fucking logo, right?
No, they have to tell you, Carl. That's lesser magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the demons.
So it's just, I just thought that was
Oh
really
god,
funny.
I love that. Oh.
Now, as we get to the allegations made by your Rudolph Giuliani's or your Lila Fifields, the OAN reporter, or your presidents of the United States of America,
Soon to be former.
it's of course not that stupid. So I largely focused on their allegations in Pennsylvania, but some things we discussed earlier will come back about. These allegations are also in Georgia and just wherever, right? Just as you said at the beginning, throwing spaghetti at the wall. So Lila Fifield said on OAN and then was tweeted by the president, election systems across the country are found to have deleted millions of votes cast for President Trump. According to an unaudited analysis of data attained from Edison Research, states that Dominion voting systems may have switched as many as 435,000 votes from President Trump to Joe Biden. And the author also finds another 2.7 million Trump votes appear to have been deleted by Dominion, including almost 1 million truckloads in Pennsylvania alone.
I heard about this. Wasn't this from that like website that came around when like the Donald subreddit got shut down, like the Donald.win or something like that?
It's definitely been on there.
Yeah. I thought there was like some asshole on there that was just like, I found the proof. And
far as I could, I mean, I'm sure it originated somewhere like that, but as far as I can tell, OAN and Gateway Pundit are the primary origin points for this one.
Interesting.
Gateway Pundit had a very similar quote, also citing Edison Research. President Trump tweeted that report Dominion deleted 2.7 million Trump votes nationwide. Data analysis finds 221,000 Pennsylvania votes switched from President Trump to Biden. 941,000 Trump votes deleted. States using Dominion voting systems switched 435,000 votes from Trump to Biden. That is a tweet from the commander-in-chief. So, firstly, a national coalition. This is an official thing. This isn't just a bunch of, like...
Okay, now we're getting into
This
the
is-
real thing.
Yeah, this is a coalition including the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Association, or CISA. Folks may recognize that as the head of CISA is the one who Trump fired when he said the election was secure.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I thought I remembered that acronym. Yeah.
But also the National Association of State Election Directors. They declared that, quote, there was no evidence that any voting system deleted votes, changed votes, or was in any way compromised, end quote. They actually used that, a lot of that EAC information was used in their analysis. The coalition noted that all close states have machines that generate paper records, like Pennsylvania, for example, which had implemented that as early as January of this year.
Okay.
And, I mean, Dominion, of course, denies the claim.
Right.
But that's, I mean, I don't expect that to be compelling to anyone.
Yeah,
Because if
it's-
they thought Dominion was involved in the conspiracy, then, of course, Dominion would,
Yeah.
would deny
They
it.
would think that, yeah.
But they provided a lot of information that backs up this denial.
Okay.
So Trump claimed that Dominion switched 942,000 votes in Pennsylvania. I'm sorry, 941,000 votes in Pennsylvania from Trump to Biden.
That's
Well,
a lot of
Pennsylvania is one of those states where counties make their own decisions as to what election systems they use. And Dominion actually only services 14 of 67 counties in Pennsylvania. And those 14 counties only account for 1.3 million votes. Of those 1.3 million votes in the 14 counties, 676,000 went to Trump, and 624,000 went to other candidates. So not all Biden, but mostly, because
Yeah.
third parties hardly get any votes because we have a two-party system, right?
Right.
So that's 300,000 votes shy of the number that Trump said were switched from Trump to Biden. He's literally alleging, just to cover the switched votes, not just the deleted ones, he would have had to get 150% of the votes that they had that weren't for him.
Yeah. In so many of these cases, like, the numbers don't pan out. It's like the number that they claim switched or was stolen is more than the number that's physically possible. Like,
yeah, I mean, you're talking about, like, in order for this conspiracy to be true, a election that produced record turnout in decades would have had to almost double the votes, and they all would have had to be for Donald Trump.
yeah.
Like, this... And then you claim that statistics shows that should be true. It's like, what? I mean, okay. But also, so we noted that Edison Research was cited both by Gateway Pundit and OAN as the source of their statistical analysis.
Do you find out who these guys are?
Yeah, they are a group that looks into statistical analysis and stuff like that. But their president, Larry Rosen, made a statement on behalf of Edison Research. This is an official statement. He did an interview on it, and he said, quote, Edison Research created no such report, and we are not aware of any voter fraud. End quote.
Wait, so he said, oh, it totally happened. It's all totally true. These guys got it right.
If that's what he meant to say, he really flubbed up the words. So Edison Research denies the existence of the report they cited.
Oh, man.
Not just that they interpreted it incorrectly, it doesn't exist.
So Carl, what is that? God, there used to be a phrase for this. I don't know what's it called. With the news, it's not real news. What is it? What's it called?
Lugenpress, I think.
Oh, fake news. Fake news. That
Yeah.
was what it was. That's what it was.
Now, of note, there were some issues documented in Georgia and Michigan, and in a few, but not all, of those locations, Dominion machines were used, but they still had paper trails. So, just as an example, in Michigan, and this wasn't Dominion, but in Michigan, they had that system that flipped. It was pretty widely reported where it flipped 5,000 votes, right?
Oh, so there actually was some vote flipping.
Well, except no,
Oh.
there wasn't really. So they investigated it immediately. They found the weird discrepancy, and it turned out to be human error.
What?
So
That's not
what happened
possible.
was someone. So there are in Michigan. There's two systems. There's the actual tabulation system, which occurs at the county level, and then there's these drives that are used to transfer the data. Because of course we don't network our election machines.
Right.
Because
That would be stupid.
duh. Yeah.
That'd
right.
be really dumb.
And the software update. So the tabulation machine, one thing, and then there's this drive used to transfer the data to a central point in the state or area that provides the unofficial ongoing count.
Okay.
Right?
Unofficial.
And it is the update to the drives wasn't done. So they fixed it, but the only thing that was affected was the unofficial count. And one of the ways they found out the unofficial count that they were reporting out was wrong was because the official tabulation was right.
Oh. Wait. Okay. So the unofficial tabulation was incorrect, and they found that out because they're like, oh, there's a difference between that and the official numbers we got. We should audit this.
The software that was updated was the software that puts the data, that communicates to the dump drive that is used to transfer the unofficial numbers.
Okay.
And so then that was read incorrectly. But all the actual counting is done within the system, so that in such a way that like it can't be updated and fuck it up because it's all just done.
Wow.
So yeah, that did happen. It was human error.
Yep.
There were some votes that changed the publicly available count. But the publicly available count isn't the official count. And not just in he didn't officially win the election until the Electoral College votes, but in quite literally, there are two separate counts that are happening.
Yeah.
One that is shared with the public and one that is actually the official vote count.
And again, like 5,000 votes sounds like a lot, but it's not.
Yeah, well, and in Michigan, the margin of victory was 150,000. They found it officially. They found it before tabulation was completed. They found that it didn't affect tabulation. They found that it only affected that county. And they had paper trail ballots that they could back check it against to make sure that they had it right.
It sounds a lot like a lot of the information that I was coming across in my research is that there's a shitload of work that comes into making sure that we have like good quality election machines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and they still have problems. There
Yeah.
are problems. There are things that need to be addressed. There should be no states that have not printed backups,
Yes.
right? Every ballot should be printed out. This is absolutely something we should do
Yep.
to make sure that everyone knows that these things can't be corrupted at a software
Yeah.
level. Or if they did, you would also have to depend on everyone to not bother checking their ballot printout.
And it's another one of these things where it's like it's really positive that all of our elections are done at the county level, because it just means
Yeah, it
that
means you
there's-
have to compromise thousands of systems.
you would have to, literally
I mean-
thousands of systems, thousands of people. It would be
Tens of thousands of people.
extremely difficult. And to the point where it would just be basically logistically impossible. Because you don't
it's security through bureaucracy.
Yeah, you don't have
in
a
some ways.
centralized system, and that's one of the reasons why the voting system for Chavez was so sketchy I guess, and brought about so much
Because it
critical.
was
It
centralized.
was centralized. Yeah, all
Yeah.
of the votes got
Yeah.
funneled
No, that's not a good idea.
into one centralized headquarters, and then the votes got all tabulated there, um,
Yeah. Well,
and
and of
reported.
note, these
Yeah.
jump drive things that I was talking about in Michigan, like even to the central server that's providing the unofficial count, they still aren't doing it over the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
I mean,
yeah.
like,
Of course not.
even that is done in a way so as to prevent network interference. And that's also, again, that shows we've got multiple ways these things are counted digitally, multiple ways they're counted by hand, multiple ways they're counted by machines, and like there's just not a lot of opportunity to subvert the actual counting process, which is what's being alleged over and over again here.
It is, and I think if I can get into this side of it a little bit, like I think having looked into this and seeing how complicated the voting process is, like how complicated logistically it is, the certification process for all these machines, for all of the software, the kind of testing that all of this stuff goes through, the approval process, the differences in different states and the county level differences, and like it it's a lot to take in. And I think that
It
it's
is.
much easier for people to simplify a very, very complicated system like this down into, well, they just got a bunch of illegal votes, and then they're just recounting the same illegal votes, and that's how the fraud happens. It's like if you really took the time to look into everything that goes into this, and I'm not, I think we've made the point that like we don't that we definitely advocate for people being critical of voting systems and to look at these things and analyze them with a critical eye.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
we just spent an hour and a half defending Dominion, a company which I will readily criticize.
Absolutely, I have no stake in these guys at all. It just, if only just to say that like it was an avenue for us to learn more about, really what goes into certifying the software and the equipment that help us,
I
exercise our
mean, even
democratic
even just
process.
the counting, a lot of the conspiracies too around like mail-in ballots seem to depend on the idea that the mail-in ballot just like shows up and just gets counted,
Right.
and
Like
like that's
there's no voter
also
registration,
not.
there's no, like, yeah, it's like there's a whole lot of things that happen before a ballot even gets cast, much less before, I mean, before it gets mailed out, even before
Yeah.
it gets
Well, and then once
tabulated.
it's received back, before it ends up at the place where it's counted, there's multiple levels of verification that occur.
Hmm.
I mean, like, could it be better? For sure.
Yeah.
Could it be more transparent? I don't even know if it could be, honestly. It was pretty darn transparent. Like we mentioned in episode 1, like many of the counting processes were streamed online.
Yeah. I mean, and that's good transparency in the process. And I think that's why I think it's so especially damaging, the things that, Trump and his personal lawyers are doing to try to undermine this incredibly complex and, our best attempt, as best as the government can do, to make a secure election system and robust one.
And they could do a lot better.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah. It's yeah, we can. There's ways to
the
make it
federal
better.
government, for example, well, as was in several of the bills passed by the House,
Hmm.
needs a new version of the EAC that makes funds available to implement things like paper ballots and risk limiting audits everywhere. I
Yeah.
mean, these,
Technology's
yeah,
changing too, and
yeah, this the science of the counting and everything else and the back checks and everything we know how to fix has come a long way in 2 decades.
it sure has. And it's come a long way, especially with, help from the federal government. Um
Yeah.
and money to help support, a more robust electoral process. It's honestly, I felt better after having looked into this stuff. I felt a lot more confident that like, there's a lot of smart people that work on this stuff.
Yeah.
And
That's very true.
yeah, it's good to know that at least there are some people out there that really do have a vested interest in keeping our elections secure. And I think that it's to the point where, I mean, there's a reason the Trump administration is losing all of these lawsuits. Like, there's a reason
Yeah.
that the only people that are out there really pushing these conspiracy theories are the people that have one, a vested interest, specifically a financial interest in the like overturning and effectively committing a coup. Um,
Rudy's asking for a pardon.
Rudy's asking for a pardon preemptively. We don't know what he's done yet,
Yeah.
but we'll find out. And with Sidney Powell, I mean, for her, it's
He's got
almost
some tax evasion issues too.
I really wonder what's up with her. I know
I was
that.
listening to some stuff on NPR for the Rudy pardon thing.
Oh, what was that?
Rudy, he's got some tax stuff
Oh,
that might be why he's asking for a pardon.
oh, some tax stuff. Well, hopefully the state,
Some weird business deals.
New York, will get him.
He's under investigation for being in the Ukraine.
Oh, of course he is. Like all these fucking like Manafort, Roger fucking Stone. Ugh,
Yeah.
gross. So Sidney Powell, because she's the one who's been so staunchly on this train. She's now dubbed herself the Kraken, or at least she's.
Oh, she's dubbed herself the Kraken.
I think so. Yeah, she identifies as a
the Kraken was
the
information she was going to release.
Yeah, she's going to release the Kraken, like from that.
And now
old
she's
movie,
the Kraken, and she's being released?
It's unclear. I think she identifies as a Kraken. I don't know if she identifies as the Kraken, but she certainly puts it in a lot of her hashtags, and it's in her Twitter bio, #Kraken. So I think she's owning that, that identity. But for anybody listening to it that's listened this far and doesn't know, she is described by some, and I would also say definitely by me, as a supporter of the QAnon conspiracy theory, which, if you don't know, is a far-right conspiracy theory which alleges that a cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiles are running a global sex trafficking ring for children and have been plotting against President Donald Trump, who is fighting said cabal.
With the aid of Robert F. Kennedy.
With the aid of
who isn't really dead.
Some factions believe that Robert Kennedy JFK Jr.
JFK Jr.
JFK Jr. is still. That's all right. I know he was the one saluting his dad's casket on the cover of Time magazine. Now he's not dead. He's still alive, and he's gonna be.
Oh, I thought it was a dead Kennedy.
Carl. He actually is dead. But he's not dead. He faked his own death, and he's still alive. And this QAnon nonsense is
also aided by Elvis and Tupac.
Not the hologram versions, the real ones. And
Biggie.
It is. I mean, she has retweeted major QAnon accounts. She has QAnon catchphrases. She denies knowledge of QAnon. But hey guys, Michael here. Quick note, in this next section, I refer to a man named Ron Watkins as the owner of 8kun and its predecessor 8chan, a website that hosted in the past child pornography and a bunch of other really awful shit. Point of order, Ron is not the owner of that website. Ron is the former administrator of 8kun, who stepped down earlier this year on November 3rd. Ron's dad, Jim Watkins, is the current owner of the website. It's a small but I felt important detail, especially since we are doing our research, and if we say things that are incorrect and we know them to be incorrect before we get this out here, we should fix it. So here you go. I want to say, Carl, that on that OAN, another person that has been involved in this kind of tertiarily is a man named Ron Watkins. I don't know if you know his name, but he was identified as...
I do. Sidney Powell has him as a major witness in one of the cases.
And
he runs a Q board.
Yeah, he runs the website called 8kun. He actually owns the...
I was reading about one of their cases, in the case that some people think may have been the Kraken.
Yeah.
He's her cybersecurity expert.
Right.
And his qualification is that he read the Dominion manual.
Yeah, literally just read the instruction manual and speculated about... as a penetration tester.
All right, bro.
Yeah. The truth with Ron Watkins is he owns an image board called 8kun, formerly 8chan, where a bunch of far-right neo-Nazi terrorists post their manifestos, and more specifically the Christchurch shooter uh, was
Yeah.
very active on there, and also they have a
It's for if you
dedicated.
can't find radical enough communities on 4chan and
Yeah,
Parler.
yeah, because like they legitimately have an image board for child abuse, for pedophilia. So a guy who is probably at the head, or at least got a controlling stake in a pedophile conspiracy theory, literally owns a website and owns the ISP that hosts the website, uh, that has an image board dedicated specifically to pedophilia. So,
And a different one to QAnon, who supposedly wants to fight that.
yeah, yeah, we're gonna have to talk about QAnon more later, I think, because I don't know, it's amazing how, I mean, how much it's seeping out into just the general political culture. I definitely have friends. I'm gonna put friends in quotes on Facebook that have been Q-pilled. Um, they took that red pill, and now they've been down that rabbit hole so long that
I think the red pill. Man, I miss when the red pill was just like thinking that toxic masculinity was a good thing.
the old days of misogyny, red pilling.
The early days of the alt right, when it was just about the toxic masculinity, not the
uh,
satanic
Satanic
child murdering cults
cabal,
of
these modern day, yeah,
Democrats.
modern day blood libel. That yeah, it just all ties back into anti-Semitic fucking tropes, and yeah, it's awful.
Adrenochrome.
Oh God.
I think I told you that I didn't know adrenochrome was a real conspiracy until a few years ago. I thought it
Yeah,
was a joke
yeah,
from the Jessica Jones comic book.
yes. Or also Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and like, oh yeah, from Fear and Loathing, and like it's been in Marvel. Like I didn't think it was even a
I know, I
people.
know, and it's a real drug. You can do it. But I mean,
I
when
mean,
you,
I guess if you want to just get high on adrenaline.
dude, we can make synthetic adrenaline. Like, you can make synthetic adrenaline. I don't, the drug makes no sense. Well, all right, you know what?
No, it
Maybe
makes
we
no
need to
sense.
just discuss
Yeah.
that on a different day. But like, it's, yeah, we
There's no meaningful difference between child adrenaline and adult adrenaline,
children
and you
can't
can make
produce. Yeah,
artificial
yeah,
adrenaline.
exactly. And the amount of adrenaline a child can produce is nothing compared to what you could just artificially produce for way cheaper. Like it just
Yeah.
it's a I
Also, we only keep a certain amount of transmitters. Like you have a pool of transmitters at any given time. Um, as an example, when you eat spicy food,
Mhm.
you genuinely the chemical reaction triggers. Very spicy food triggers a chemical reaction that causes the neurotransmitter that causes pain to activate. And if you eat a lot of spicy food, you gradually deplete that neurotransmitter, and your body just can't keep up with producing it, which is why people build up a tolerance. One of the reasons people build up a tolerance to spicy
I
food.
did not know that.
Well, the same thing is kind of true with various neurotransmitters. When they get used in a big burst, there's not as much left until the body can make more of them again,
Interesting.
right? Which, I mean, if you haven't thought about it before, you wouldn't have thought about it. But once you know that, it makes sense,
Yeah, it's kind of
right?
like your mana, right?
And
You just deplete your mana, in one big giant spell that you cast, and then you have to wait for it to recharge.
kind of. I, Yeah, kind of
All
actually.
right.
So like yeah, if you get a big serotonin rush, your body needs to replenish that serotonin. You don't have an infinite supply of serotonin. You also don't have an infinite supply of adrenaline. So some of these conspiracies about adrenochrome involve scaring the person, right, or child, I guess, right before you harvest their adrenal gland and get the adrenaline. But when you scared them, they would have released a bunch of it, so they'd even have less.
Well, it's the idea is it's circulating in their blood now, so that you can drink their blood, and it's got the adrenaline in it, and that somehow makes the adrenaline more potent. I guess. I don't really understand that part of it, but
You know why?
because it's fucking
This is
bullshit.
bullshit.
Yeah, but there are very prominent people who believe in this shit, and one of them just happens to be I guess, thank God, or thank someone. I don't know. Now, former attorney for the president of the United States. Sidney Powell was just a little bit too crazy for Giuliani and
Rudy
Trump.
Giuliani.
Yeah, and so last week they said nope, she's practicing law on her own, and good luck to her, and we don't have anything to do with her. She's not on our
Though they
team.
continue to quote her, and
They continue to quote
she
her.
continues to file cases.
Yep, and I think it's very telling if you go to her website and look at what she's doing to raise money for these legal challenges that she's putting forward.
She just spoke at a Stop the Steal rally today.
Yeah, well, and
where they
it's very clear what she's doing with this, because you can see, like, even in her donation instructions, it says to make checks payable directly to her, not to any sort of PAC, not to any sort of organization that's involved in helping to stop this deal, just directly to Sidney Powell. Just literally send me money.
That is some just.
I love it.
You know what? I'll give it.
I love
that
it.
is some just bold face grifting right
It's just
there.
like,
That is.
I am writing way too many bullshit
That's not
lawsuit filings. Yeah. Like, I do not have time to come up with a more creative solution for this. Just fucking send me money.
At least when the Trump campaign put up their election fraud fund, at least they hid their grift in the legal language of the fund.
Yeah, right? And behind a PAC.
Like, just send me a check,
This is
bro.
like, right? sign me your checks. Send me your PayPal. I'm starting an OnlyFans. I don't. Ugh. No, maybe Patreon. That's better.
Yes.
No, I made myself sad. Yeah. So I mean, there's so much to talk about with this stuff, and there's just so much you could dive into if you really were really curious and you really wanted to look at how we, like I said, how we certify elections, how we certify equipment, how we certify software, all of the
even how we count physical votes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's conspiracies around the verification of signatures and setting aside the veracity of handwriting analysis. Like, there's a lot of steps that go into it before a vote's even counted.
Yeah, it made me feel a little bit better reading it, to go, oh, there is a lot that goes into this. This is a complicated thing, and I think as we're finding out as we are looking into these things, that it is bureaucracy that's kind of really helping us keep away from.
If ever there is a silver lining to the Donald Trump presidency, it is the awareness of the functions and sort of some of the arcane functions of the U.S. government, and just general awareness of how things worked that have been prompted by him lying and obfuscating and misleading about so many things.
Well, just in case I hadn't made a point about how terrible Sidney Powell is yet, just through inference, because we're talking about all her bullshit, I think it's also important to let you know that one of the things that I found out about her was that she spent almost a decade in the 2000s representing firms and executives in appellate courts involved in the Enron scandal.
Nice.
Yeah, including the accounting firm Arthur Andersen and former Merrill Lynch executive Jim Brown.
Nice.
Yep. And she was an outspoken critic of the Enron task force that was, set up by Congress to, look into how the Enron scandal happened and how we needed to have some federal oversight in how publicly traded companies do their accounting. So she defended those guys.
I'm glad we're not on video, so you can't see how shocked I am that Sidney Powell would have fought against oversight.
Yeah, right. So she's been on this train for a long time, and she's been defending assholes for just as long.
Oh, at their Stop the Steal rally today, they also were trying at several points they were telling Georgia voters not to bother voting in the Senate runoffs because
yes.
cheated.
Oh my God, yes.
Which I gotta say, sure.
Yeah.
That's how you could stick it to
Let
me.
them fight.
I would be one sad lib if all the Republicans just stayed home in January.
Yeah.
That would really show me. It's basically a Democratic primary, honestly. I
Wow.
mean, Loeffler and Perdue aren't doing nearly enough to protect the president. They're rhinos for
Oh
sure,
man.
right?
And if
I
that
mean, look at those two rhinos. They're basically progressives.
oh
I wouldn't be surprised if they worked with AOC on the Green New Deal.
Carl, we need to get you on OAN. Quick, we're just gonna switch about face 100%. We're gonna be totally pro conspiracy theory. These Republicans, it's all a scam. They're just trying to steal the election. They're all a bunch of
And
rhinos.
steal your information. If you vote, they'll steal your
Oh,
identity.
they're gonna put you. They're gonna have hit squads coming next.
They are. I mean, you've heard how Bernie wanted re-education camps, and
Re-education
this is
through
how they're going to
labor.
get the roles.
Yep.
They forgot to do it on November 3rd.
They did, but they're coming
So
back around.
they need to do it again.
Fucking hell.
Oh, you know what it is? They stored the data at those servers in Frankfurt. And now, since the U.S. Army took them, they don't have it, and they have to get it again in the Georgia runoff.
If there's one thing I know about the U.S. Army, it has jurisdiction in Germany.
Over a Spanish company.
Just commit an act of war on foreign soil against a company that's not involved in anything. God, this is so stupid. I can't. The more and more I look into this, the more I'm like, oh, hey, this is all interesting and cool and complex and neat. And then I look at the conspiracy theories and I'm like, fucking God. It just in the YouTube comments. Ugh, I can't. I can't. It's depressing.
Oh yeah, the ones on that Blaze video were rough.
Man, I don't even think they're all Russian trolls anymore. I think they're all real people.
Oh, they're absolutely not.
Yeah.
No. Many of them are actually our fellow American citizens who have been duped and deluded.
Yeah. Guys, I just want to say that, not everything is a conspiracy. Think critically. Don't be so attached to authoritarians that claim that they can fix all your problems, that they're your salvation. Yeah.
Yeah. Joe Biden can't
no,
either, by the way.
No, he can't.
Nor could Bernie Sanders or anyone else.
No, he can't. But we can all band together.
It would take a concerted effort of decades to fix everything in the United States.
It would. And we have to work together to do it. We can't exclude anybody from the process. They have to all be involved.
And no one wants to turn the U.S. into Venezuela, by the way.
God. No.
No one wants to implement USSR-style communism.
No, certainly not. I would like to see more outreach. I'm glad at least that Biden is going to try. I think he's a little naive and maybe his methods are going to be outdated, but I think
I don't know, man. He was the vice president of Barack Obama, and who recently gave a very candid interview where he talked about his challenges of working with bipartisanship, and Biden was the one in charge of trying to corral Mitch McConnell. I'm not convinced that he is naive, but what I do think he's doing is saying these things because it is what a president should say. Because he also put out a statement today where he just said he's going to enact his agenda as quickly as possible.
Yeah. His radical agenda to undo everything Obama did and to repair this American wasteland and make America great again, right? Yeah. Is that what he was saying?
Yeah, exactly. Ugh. Yeah.
Well,
I don't know. But to your point, I think the president should be calling for unity. The president should be... We should absolutely extend the olive branch. We should just be prepared for them to smack it away and then react accordingly and not continue to pretend that bipartisanship is possible, because the Republicans killed it when they refused to even one of them vote for the ACA after a year of negotiations.
Yeah. There's a lot of fingers that you can keep pointing. I think that the intelligent thing to do is one, keep trying, but also don't let trying get in the way of progress.
Yeah, well, I think a good example there is like the cabinet. The Republican-controlled Senate allowed Trump to sit there with a mostly empty executive branch.
Yeah.
They allowed him to use the act to keep cabinet secretaries and whatnot in positions, even though they hadn't been officially confirmed, and never said a thing. So if they are going to refuse to even give hearings to Biden's cabinet picks, which, by the way, is completely unprecedented in all of American history.
It's like we're not even doing our jobs anymore. We're not even pretending
no,
to do our jobs.
You lost the election. You don't get to pick the executive branch.
No, sorry.
A Republican senator said that one of Biden's picks was a non-starter because she'd been mean to Republicans on Twitter.
Oh, God.
I'm sorry, but just fuck them.
Oh,
Did you see your president?
How do you say that with a straight face? You must be a politician.
He called Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas for years.
Ugh.
He ran the birtherism conspiracy.
I don't know. I think at the end of this, like I'm more and more just depressed with the quality of these conspiracy theories. It's like they're not even trying.
Yeah, that is it. I think I told you this, but it feels just more like the conversations I have about this far right world are feeling increasingly more and more like when I'm geeking out over like Marvel and the 616 universe, or describing some sort of just literal fictional universe, because they have such little bearing on reality.
Yeah, it is a certain kind of fantasy. And we're, dipping our toes into it, and it is burning our tootsies.
Yeah.
And brains. My brain is melted. Well, buddy, this was fun. Do you have any final thoughts you want to convey?
No, I don't think I could add anything. Well,
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure I could go off on another 16 tangents for 4 more hours, but seeing as we're approaching the 2-hour mark rapidly, no.
Well, we'll leave it there then. I think we'll say, for my final thoughts, just, conspiracy theorists, try harder.
Yeah.
And everybody else, hey, be nice to each other, be good to each other, take care of each other, wear a mask, wash your hands.